Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Ravana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra, Jaya Sudarshana, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava Radhe, Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya 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 Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Gaura Nitai Jaya Gaura Nitai Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha Jaya Ananta Dev Prahlad Narasimha Jaya Ananta Dev Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha Jaya Ananta Dev Prahlad Narasimha Jaya Ananta Dev Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमद अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय ब्रजभूमि श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय मायापुर श्री नवद्वीप धाम की जय मथुरा धाम की जय द्वारका धाम की जय जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय गंगा माई की जय यमुना माई की जय भक्ति देवी की जय तुलसी महारानी की जय समवेत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय गौर भक्त प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल ऑल ग्लोरीज टू द assembled devotees हरे कृष्णा all glories to the assembled devotees हरे कृष्णा all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga Jai Shri Prabhupada Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Hare Krishna devotees, welcome for Sri Jagannath Mandir Seshadripuram morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we have been asked to discuss third canto, 11th chapter called Calculation of Time from the Atom, and we will be discussing verse number 9 through 13. Quite a few verses. Let's try to cover them. Verse 9. Just share the screen. Okay, so I hope it is visible now. I'll read the 9th verse. Dvadasharda falonmanam chatur angulaihi swarnamasaihi krita chidram yavat pashta jalaplutam. Dvadasha artha 6 pala of the scale of weight. Unmanam measuring part. Chaturbihi by weight of 4. Chatur angaihi 4 fingers by measure. Swarna of gold. Masaihi of the weight. Krita chidram making a hole. Yavat as long as. Prashta measuring 1 prashta. Jalaplutam filled by water. Translation. The measuring part for 1 nadika or danda can be prepared with a 6 pala weight 14 ounce pot of copper, in which a hole is bored with a gold probe weighing 4 masa and measuring 4 fingers long. When the pot is placed on water, the time before the water overflows in the pot is called 1 danda. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. It is advised herein that the bore in the copper measuring pot must be made with a probe weighing not more than 4 masa and measuring not longer than 4 fingers. This regulates the diameter of the hole. The pot is submerged in water and the overfloating time is called a danda. This is another way of measuring the duration of a danda, just as time is measured by sand in a glass. It appears that in the days of Vedic civilization, there was no dearth of knowledge in physics, chemistry, or higher mathematics. Measurements were calculated in different ways as simply as could be done. Verse 10. Yamas chatvaro martyanam ahani uhbe pakshaha pancha dashahani shuklaha krishnacha manada. Translation. It is calculated that there are 4 praharas, which are also called yamas, in the day and 4 in the night of the human being. Similarly, 15 days and nights are a fortnight, and there are 2 fortnights, white and black, in a month. Verse 11. verse 11. Tayoho samuchayo masaha pitrinam tad aharnisham dvav tav rutah sad ayanam dakshinam chotaram divi. Translation: the aggregate of 2 fortnights in 1 month, and that period is 1 complete day and night for the Pita planets. 2 of such months comprise 1 season, and 6 months comprise 1 complete movement of the sun from south to north. Verse number 12. Ayane chahani prahur vatsaro dvadasha smritaha samvatsara satam nrinam paramayur nirupitam. Translation: 2 solar movements make 1 day and night of the demigods, and that combination of day and night is 1 complete calendar year for the human being. The human being has a duration of life of 100 years. Verse 13. Graharksha tarachakrastaha paramanu adina jagat samvatsara vasanena paryeti animisho vibuhu. Translation: influential stars, planets, luminaries, and atoms all over the universe are rotating in their respective orbits under the direction of the Supreme, represented by eternal Kala. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that the sun in the eye of the Supreme, it is stated that the sun is the eye of the Supreme and it rotates in its particular orbit of time. Similarly, beginning from the sun down to the atom, all bodies are under the influence of the Kala Chakra, or the orbit of eternal time, and each of them has a scheduled orbital time of 1 samvatsara. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadanti Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapatakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrinda Vaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaurabhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So now this chapter is called the calculation of time from the atom. So this entire, the various chapters here that we are reading is talking about, Brahma's creation. The primary creation was discussed last week, and then the secondary creation, how it started, and then the 9 types of creations, all that was discussed. Now we are coming to the point of more gross, how the creations is further continued. So in this concept, the most important aspect is the time, right? All this creation happens within a span of time, and then it gets annihilated all by the predetermined wish of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and this is calculated in terms of the time. So here the description of how you calculate time has been discussed in these verses that we are reading now. If you have to look at this concept of time, actually it starts with the atom. Like, if you see the 5th verse, somewhere that definition is slightly given there. The division of gross time is calculated as follows. 2 atoms make 1 double atom and 3 double atoms make 1 hexa atom. This hexa atom is visible in the sunshine which enters through the holes of the window screen. One can clearly see that the hexagon goes up towards the sky. So, and it's also defined in the 4th verse. Atomic time is measured according to its covering a particular atomic space. That time which covers the unmanifest aggregate of atoms is called the great time. So basically, the atom, which is considered the smallest particle, like, even in today's science also we call it an atom, but in Sanskrit it's called paramanu. But the atom that we talk of in the material world in today's science is not exactly what is being talked about in the paramanu, the atom that we are discussing here. This paramanu is even more subtler than the atom that we see here. For example, if you are to, the modern way of understanding everything is basically starting from this material, right? That means we look at everything which is basically material, or in other words, the gross earth. But the Vedic principles has something beyond. Like, see, in material world, everything is talked as the material aspects that are available in our current sphere of knowledge, which is basically the earth, water, fire, and maybe, I don't know, we can call it space, something what the material scientists are aware of, something called a space. So we are basically looking at everything, and all of this is basically starting from the matter. Or in other words, you can call everything as part of earth. Like, for example, even this, when we say water or air, these are also different forms of earth in one sense. To say, for example, if you have to look at water, the grossest form of water, which is solid, it is basically ice. And when that becomes a little diluted, it's in a flowing form, it becomes water. So earth, water. Then you talk about that water which is slightly, heated, boiled above 100 degree. Then it translates into vapor, and that becomes air or gas. So our understanding from the modern concept is everything related to the gross elements within this earth, but there is much more things which are beyond, which is the subtle form which we are able to understand from the Vedic scripture. So in that sense, this atom is not exactly the atom that we see, because this atom is more of a breaking up of a particular material item we consider an atom. But in the spiritual context, it is it's something which is overall a force, and that which basically develops into this gross forms. So in that sense, a combination of a few atoms gives a physical body, but before that it exists, but it is formless. So that's the slightly extension of this atom that we know of from a material concept. That combination of a few atoms make the grosser forms, that it takes a shape and then it combines, and then that becomes the actual atom which is there. And then how is time described is also explained here. Time is described by movement of something across another thing, that way. Like, for example, in the grossest form, when we talk about earth, we are measuring time in terms of the sun's movement from point A to point B. Then we say, okay, if a sun moves from so and so point to so and so point, then it becomes a night, and then an equal time is considered a night. So on and so forth. Then its direction over a period of thing. Then the different seasons, and then it completes one full rotation. Or rather, we in the material science we call the earth going around the sun for one rotation, but in the spiritual side it is the other way around. It is the sun which is actually moving around. But nonetheless, it is about movement of a particular gross item over a period, over a particular space. in which the atoms are there. That is considered the passing away of time. So we need to understand time from that perspective, and this time actually, even the body, right? As the body keeps with the passing away of passing of the sun from one to another, the body keeps on changing, and in the process, the body becomes completely old and useless, annihilated. So, and all activities happen in the passage of this time. Like, there's nothing called frozen time in this material world. I mean, time, they say, what is this? Time and something else never stops for anyone. What is that? Time and tide never stops for anyone. The tide means what is we see in the ocean. Sometimes we say, like,
I didn't understand that.
So sometimes people say, like, if you keep on saying, postponing some activity, then someone will say, are you waiting for the tide to stop? Like, that means that never stops. So it's always happening. The same thing with time. The time never stops. And a fixed time is given for every living entity to be manifest and then perform its activity. Then the gross body is actually annihilated. Within that time frame that the particular soul is given the use of a particular material combination of items which forms into a body. So this is the thing that is being considered here, which is the most important thing, calculation of time and atom. There are further description of how this time is also given, like, for example, when we take further the extension of that time, so that atom, the movement of the sun over an atom is given a particular name that we would have seen in the previous verses. And then a few of the combination of these paramanu or atoms together forms one particular unit, and then further combination of that, and the movement of the sun from this combination to that combination, it goes on expanding further and further to give different higher, just like we say second, minutes, hours, like that, it keeps on going. And from whatever I read in the previous verse, it is said that a combination of three of this hexagonal ones, which will form one unit called Triti, and 100 of these Tritis join together to form a lava. So lava, that lava is one word we would have seen. They say, right, lava matra sadhu sangha. Like, we say, sadhu sangha hoy, lava matra sadhu sangha sarva siddhi hoy. That lava matra is actually that time frame that is being given. That is actually explained by Srila Prabhupada, that lava is equal to actually 1/5 of a second. Can you imagine that lava? In terms of our modern science, if you call something at 1 second, it basically consists of 5 to 6. It is actually said equivalent to 1/5 of that. That means around 200 to 300 units of the Triti. It is mentioned that Triti is basically 1687.5 division of a second. And then if 5 of this, if it is divided by 5, that is equal to the point of called the lava. So that lava is basically 1/5 of a second. So lava matra sadhu sangha, just imagine the power of a pure devotee. Associating with him for 1/5 of a second actually gives sarva siddhi. That means one actually gets all the whatever the desires fulfilled. So that is the duration of 3 lava is called 1 nimisha. So here the 3 lavas are considered as 1 nimisha. The combination of 3 nimisha make 1 kshana. 5 kshanas combine together to make 1 kasha, and 15 kasha make 1 lagu. Now this 15 lagu make 1 nadika, or in other words also called danda. So this lagu, how it is expanding further and further, that's why I had to talk about the other things up to lagu. So now it is mentioned 15 lagus joined together to form a nadika or a danda, what we have been talked about. And how to measure that danda, that's what is this verse we are discussing, verse number 9, where it is said, it is measured through a pot. Obviously, the measuring pot of one nadika or danda is the starting of this verse, which is one pot is there, which is made of copper. And the weight of that copper is actually 6 pala, which is basically translated as 14 ounces of copper. So that's maybe the pot in which, I don't know the volume of how much pot can be made with that 14 ounces. So when a pot of that size comprising of 14 ounces of copper is made, then a hole is made into that pot, like, the top is covered and then you make a hole in that. And what should be the size of hole is also described here. It says the size of that hole should be basically made by a gold probe. That means some kind of an incision to be made with that gold probe. And what should be the size of that gold probe which will make a cut in that part is basically consists of 4 masa. It is mentioned the 4 masa is one other measure, which is on the size of that incisor or whatever, the cutting tool, which is the gold, which weighs 4 masa, and it should measure 4 fingers long. So that is the length through which size for which the cut has to be made in that gold pot. And after that, if that the copper pot, and if that copper pot is immersed in water, how long it takes to fill up and starts overflowing, that time is called danda. It's mentioned here. And Prabhupada somewhere explains that this danda is roughly equivalent to half an hour in today's context. And therefore 5 to 6 danda makes 1/4 of a day. So like that 4 times it makes a whole day like this. This is the kind of measure. Just like in today we also know this clock, right? There will be 2 inverted cups like that, and then sand will be on one portion, and then if it is kept like that, then the sand will start pouring down and it will come down to the bottom cup, and the time taken to completely will always be constant, and that can be one of the measures. Like this is a measure in Vedic times that has been described here in this particular verse. And if you go further down, the further calculations are also made. It is calculated that there are 4 praharas, which are also called yamas, in the day and 4 in the night of the human being. Similarly, 15 days and fortnights are called 15 nights are a fortnight, and there are 2 fortnights which are fortnights white and black in a month. Though we are aware of this, right? In a fortnight, there is this Paurnami or the full moon day, and then this Amavasya, which is the dark or no moon day. And the period from Amavasya to the full moon is called Sukla Paksha. And the period from full moon down to the no moon day is called as Krishna Paksha. So that is the white and black that is being talked about here. So this combination is there within a month. 2 fortnights, 1 fortnight the rising moon, and 1 fortnight the waning moon. And then the aggregate of 2 fortnights is 1 month. That means 2 fortnights we know is a month even in our normal English calendar. And that period is 1 complete day and night for the Pitru planet. And then this time, in relation to the other planetary system, is being also explained, which is talking about 1 month is actually equivalent to 1 day. 1 month is equivalent to 1 day in the Pitru Loka. 2 of such months comprise 1 season, and 6 months comprise 1 complete movement of the sun from south to north. So that is also there. So in Pitruloka, 1 full month in our period is actually 1 day in Pitruloka. And in our context, 2 such things contribute a season, and the travel of the moon from one point to another. Here it is mentioned 2 such months comprise 1 season, and 6 months comprise 1 complete movement of the sun from south to north. That has been mentioned. And 2 solar moments make 1 day and night of the demigods, which means 2 solar moments means 2 6 months in our time frame, which becomes 1 year, which is the complete rotation of the sun across the earth according to material science. But that 1 year is, in terms of a demigod's thing, is 1 day. So basically 1 month is 1 day in Pitruloka, 1 year is 1 day in the what do you call heavenly planet. So like this, each planetary system's time varies, and here comparison between ours, Pitraloka, and also the maybe the Brahmaloka, the heavenly planets, have been compared here. And the last more important point is influential stars, planets, luminaries, and atoms all over the universe are rotating in their respective orbits under the directions of the Supreme, represented by eternal Kala. So that's the most important thing within all these things. While all these things are there, but how do they function? They all function under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord says, right, Maya Dakshena Suyate Characharam. That means he says, the entire universe is revolving under my direction. The material nature is functioning under my direction. This is the verdict of the Lord in Bhagavad Gita. He says, Maya Dakshena Shruyate Saracharam. The entire universe is revolving around under my direction. Now, this Prabhupada writes, right, it appears that all of, in verse number 9, Prabhupada writes in that purport, he says that it appears that in that days of Vedic civilization, there was no dearth of knowledge in physics, chemistry, or higher mathematics. Measurements were calculated in different ways as simply as could be done. And it's also quite simple ways of doing it. Don't need big lot of apparatus and things like that, which we use in mathematics in today's modern world. But there are so many ways of depth in all these knowledges. But unfortunately, we particularly in India, we have lost this entire culture. Earlier, if you see, even any common man will tell what time of the day it is by seeing the sun only, right? If you see, even today, you can go to some villages, they don't need a big, very sophisticated watch to tell what is the time. They will simply look at the sun and they will say, this is the, this time it is in the day. And when they actually see a cloud, I know of one grandfather in our family, he will actually look at the cloud and he will say what kind of rain will be there, whether rain will be there or not, and all of these kind of things. They will also know exactly when the rainy seasons will start. They will know exactly. It's not that they need to physically look at so many apparatuses to say all these things. Sometimes it may be so very cloudy, you may think it will rain, but he will say very clearly it will not rain today, and it will not rain. They have all this knowledge. This has been there in our tradition in Indian culture. Unfortunately, with the advent of the British colonization of India, they basically, it was planned. The British, I have seen this, that, there is one person called Macaulay. So this gentleman, I don't know if I should call him in another term, but he was seeing that, this Indian people are very, very, very strong in the way they are. So we need to break that. Their system is so perfect that it is not easy to actually subject them as our slaves. It's not possible because they have this wonderful Varnashrama system. There is this, the Brahmana class who are very knowledgeable, and everybody take direction only from this Brahmana. Therefore, we need to break this jinx that they should not be able to respect the Brahmanas, and then they will start listening to any nonsense that we give them. Because generally, if you see any class of people, they will regard this Brahmana in a very highly high position. In fact, he understood this. There was one. They started employing many different people in their government jobs, right? If my memory serves me right, this was the incident when he actually realized this point. There was, and of course, they also corrupted the Brahmanas. They started giving this Brahmanas means the class of men who were actually practicing devotional life in some form and shape. But they somehow tempted, because that's the most important thing. Your Brahmanical qualities are there, but by association, we may be actually corrupt. So they lured these Brahmanas to material sense gratification very nicely. And they started giving these Brahmanical class of men very big posts, right? Nice posts and good salary, which generally a Kshatriya does, right? A Kshatriya generally is in a very opulent position and all that. but they started luring these Brahmanas to take up such positions. And in the process, they were the Brahmanas were becoming degraded with material contamination. Now, in the course, there was a Brahmana who was actually driven to be a peon, something like that, who in a lower category of work he was doing, because ruled by money, he was taking up material life, and he was even ready to do any kind of job. So he was actually in a slightly lower category. I don't know if a peon or a clerk or something like that. And then another man who was much lower than him in the so-called caste system, because caste system is not driven by really birth, that we have discussed many times, but in the society it was made like that. Even before the British, that people started exploiting, but British came and exploited that system very nicely, and the Brahmanas were now more Brahmanas, but they were going down. But still in the society, the Brahmanas were respected because they are supposed to but they did know a lot of stuff, but it's all the point of slowly contaminating. So somewhere in between that time frame. But this Macaulay saw that when this fellow was lower in the position as a clerk or something, a higher officer was someone who's actually much lower down the social class, so-called caste system. So he was a Shudra or something like that. And when that man came into the office, he will first pay obeisances to this clerk who is a Brahmana, and then only he will start his job. So they say, he's an officer, but that fellow is actually paying obeisances to this clerk and is very humble to him. And therefore, he realized this Brahmanical class has to be actually contaminated so strongly, and then people will not pay any heed to this Brahmanas. Then we can break their culture strongly. So this is what Mr. Macaulay thought. And then he devised his education system in such a way that, the Vedic thing is taken away, and they give this completely materialistic understanding of things. And the hindrance to that is the Brahmana who will say, no, actually, there is this soul. And then, you are not going to live only once, you are going to live eternally and all that stuff. So the gratification is sort of reduced in our Vedic understanding that, don't just run after the body, run after the needs of the soul. But they want to say, no, you just have to run for the body, work hard like an ass and earn that little bread. And that is how their economy, that model of economy will grow. So they wanted to systematically break down this. And in the process, we lost this entire Vedic science, so to say. And then we were sort of mechanized to believe what the West says, what the Western masters say. They say, you have to believe like this. Yes, I will believe. Your grandfather is a monkey. Yes, I believe my grandfather is a monkey. The Darwin's theory came in the Western world, and then they said, your grandfather, man evolved from a monkey, therefore he's a monkey. So Prabhupada once, when encountered with this situation, he said, maybe your grandfather is a monkey, my grandfather was not a monkey. Prabhupada made that such a comment like that. So, but unfortunately, we have been following this Western culture and running after this knowledge. And today, even more contaminated, that, if the idea of knowledge is simply to get a job, right? Today, all of us are looking to study what course which gives us better jobs, which gives us more money, which will give us the visa to go to US or, any Western world where we can get better salary. This is now part of this routine. We are sort of pushed into doing something like that. So the education is more to drive how I can earn, not for the knowledge that we are supposed to get. Earlier, it was not like that. Economy and knowledge were two different aspects. Knowledge is Brahmana. That means it is not that knowledge is tied to your earning capacity. Earning capacity is tied to your trade. That means the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas particularly, were basically traders. It's not that they were very intelligent, Brahmanical or knowledge class. They knew their knowledge is based only about only trade, not about the real knowledge. And real knowledge is not the expansion of matter knowledge, which is basically how do you use an atom to destroy the world. That is today's knowledge. But that knowledge is not restricted to matter in terms of Vedic knowledge. That knowledge is about the purpose of life. This thing can go on, this Vaishya activities of, becoming very rich to make a living, because Krishna has provided all the facilities needed in this world for all of us to live and eat. For example, Prabhupada also makes this statement: how many elephants are there in Africa? There are hundreds or thousands of elephants. Are these elephants going to the factories to make their food? No. Krishna has provided. It is not that one needs to work in these factories to get the food. But we have made the system in such a way that to get your basic food, we have to, just like this ass, right? The ass is conditioned. It is thinking, I will get this morsel of glass only if I carry this heavy load in my back. But actually, the ass does not realize that grass is growing somewhere on your platform. You can go and eat it. But it is conditioned to think that only if I carry this load, that will I be able to eat that morsel of grass, because this fellow is the one who is the giver of this grass, according to the ass. Similarly, we have made this conditioning in our own self that we have to go through this education system to earn our living. But Krishna has given the ending. So that those days it is not. They were completely dealing. The Brahmanical class was giving this knowledge, and every class of people will go to this Brahmana to understand this knowledge of self-realization. And economy is a completely different line altogether, and the society pulled in to take care of Brahmanas, and then the various in the Varnashramas is the system where the Brahmanas, the what do you call the sannyasis and the brahmacharis were all taken care of from the point of eating. That was never a problem. It was all, they were actually fed by the other Vaishyas and the Kshatriyas. So they don't have to worry about this running like an ass and working hard for material knowledge. The knowledge means spiritual knowledge. And actually, that is what is preaching all about. Preaching means it is not simply that, I give some, preaching means giving knowledge. And what is that knowledge? Knowledge of the spiritual consciousness, knowledge of the spiritual world, knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowledge of the constitutional position of this body. You can simply start with this point of, what is the difference between matter as in a body which is alive and a body which is dead. If you simply start looking at that concept, that's knowledge. And this is also a spiritual topic to discuss. This is what is the expected responsibility of all the devotees, that we should be able to go and give this knowledge. See, this system of this Western has actually completely made this entire population of 1.3 billion Indians into this kind of a ignorance. Preaching is basically reviving our Vedic consciousness, and today it is not. If you simply talk about this, nobody is going to accept that. Therefore, you can't now change this whole system which is so much soaked into it by how can you logically do that? Is what is Prabhupada's wonderful concept of actually giving these books. Through these books, he has given all this knowledge that we need, which was there in the Vedic times in the texts of Sanskrit or those kind of things. But he has brought all of them into the English and any various languages that is there. Actually, if you see, this is a big revolution to roll back whatever nonsense which has happened over the last 60, 70 years. If you really deeply think about it, Prabhupada has actually given all these texts. With these texts, what happens? People read. And when you read, you get a counter to what is happening in today's world. And slowly, even though we may be sucked, we have no option but to follow the current system. But we also know how to slowly withdraw, right? And over a period of time, with many, many people, 1.3 billion people, when they start getting this version of what real knowledge is, then slowly we can actually undo the nonsense that has happened. And people, it's all about people, right? If we all decide, okay, this is what should be the knowledge system and not this, that's all. You can completely close that and go into this what you call Vedic system of Gurukul. Basically, Gurukul means it's not just about the way you live. It's all about how the process of knowledge gathering and what exactly is knowledge. That can be. But then when 1.3 billion people are not ready to do, you alone will not be able to do. First is to change this consciousness of this 1.3 billion people, how to do that. And that is these books. Preaching means going and giving this knowledge, which means going and giving these books, giving this knowledge, giving this awareness to the people. what it is. Simply now we extend this concept of atom. Atom is able to function because there is some force behind that. Now, the body is all a combination of various atoms, but it is dead matter. Material science starts with the dead matter, but Vedic science goes beyond that, and it says what drives this atom? What is the difference between dead body and a living body? Then that matter. That particle, whatever it is, that driving force is called the soul. Now take that extent. Therefore, if there's something called soul, what is its nature? Then you understand that it is spiritual nature, which means there has to be something more that where does the soul actually originate from? Then you understand there is a spiritual world. And then, and you can always contrast between this material world and spiritual world. This soul, which is basically spiritual, and this spiritual soul is basically from the spiritual world. And in that spiritual world, everything is actually conscious. Nothing is like here, a lot of things are unmanifest. They are actually inert, right? In this material world. But there, everything is actually fully conscious and fully active, including the mountains, the trees, and whatnot and what all. And all of this rolls into that. The position of all of this soul or the spiritual beings, not only this particular soul, but there are hundreds and millions and trillions of other souls which are all there. And all of these souls are actually constitutionally the servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the flow. That beyond this matter, the spirit, and then the spirit in the spiritual world is there, and which is the qualities of the spiritual world, and who are the other living entities in that spiritual world, and who's the master of all of that. That's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, our job is basically to be the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and understand that there is something much beyond this material world, and that we are actually part of that spiritual world, and we are the pure spiritual consciousness. And we sitting here having little bit of this Vedic knowledge, how we can actually translate, having been put in a situation of, having to forget that and take up some other thing, which is so-called education of modern world, how to bring this Vedic knowledge back into the lives of not only India, then take it all over the world. That process is very important for all devotees. And the point of verse 13, where we understand clearly that under the direction of the Supreme, everything moves, including those big planetary systems. What about us souls? We are actually a simple part and parcel of the Supreme, who are eternal servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And our job, therefore, is simply to try to situate ourselves in that position. So this is where I could gather, based on this purport, understanding the technical aspects are important. What we draw from that is what is my thought, that we need to come to that position of being the eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I will conclude here. If there are any comments, any questions, welcome. Hare Krishna. There's this concept which I was talking, I thought I should also talk about that, but I see, when we say, I was talking about this point of material science is not exactly in line with the spiritual Vedic understanding. We talked about that, right? For example, when we say air, right? The air that we talk in the material world is nothing but the gases, which is basically the oxygen, the hydrogen, the nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and there are so many other, methane, so many different types of gases which are there. But when you talk about air as in the spiritual, they're also made of air. We say that, right? Air, water, ether, and all that. But that air is slightly different from this air. But that air is basically the source of this air. For example, when you say in our material concept, we start from, if I have to live, I take in air, and water, you take carbon dioxide. And then you exhale sorry, you take oxygen and you exhale carbon dioxide. This is our basic understanding. But from the Vedic perspective, this air is actually called 5 types of air they talk about. And it's not this oxygen, hydrogen, or nitrogen, what it is. It is basically prana, apana, samana, vyana, and udana. These are the 5 airs. And these airs actually control your breathing. Not all of these airs. Each air has, like if you see, if they say, right, in the soul, where is it sitting? Then it is covered by 5 layers of air, they say. And this 5 layers of air actually make this material body function, and for that it is actually taking oxygen and then releasing carbon dioxide. So the driving force is this prana vayu, not the oxygen or thing. The original driving force. The secondary layer may be oxygen, but material science starts with this primary layer of oxygen. If you really see this prana vayu, they say, right? The prana vayu is the one which is instrument for our breathing. Then this apana vayu. This apana vayu is basically the one which actually removes all the dirt from the body. Like, for example, all the stool, the urine, everything is actually managed by this apana vayu in the body. We look at it as carbon dioxide, right? Basically it exhales all the bad thing is absorbed from the blood, and then it comes out, and then it goes as carbon dioxide, and the matter is checked out through the the urine and the stool. But this apana actually is the one which controls this aspect of the excretion, basically. And then the samana actually controls the nervous system. So like this, there are this vyana and udana also have some responsibility to manage the affairs within this material body. So the concept of Vedic is these 5 airs which actually control. So while they are also air, this is also air. My point is, material things start with gross matter, but spiritual Vedic knowledge starts with slightly something which is much more subtler than this gross. And this gross is an extension of that subtle elements. So I will conclude here. Again, sorry that I again brought it back, but if there are any points, any comments, most welcome. Hare Krishna. Okay. So if there are no questions, no comments, I know it's a lot technical. We will, it's also mentioned just in Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, there are so many things. Sometimes, we as devotees, sometimes we may think, this is not important. But what we need to understand is every portion of the scriptures have to be taken with the same seriousness and the importance. It's like sometimes, it's like, where Prabhupada has used these examples. We want to worship Krishna, but then, this war is not something which I do. So the war portion, what is Bhagavad Gita, they are afraid to keep it in their homes only. They say, no, it will create war in the home. But they want Lakshmi, right? So everything of the Supreme Lord is completely transcendental. Nothing is, this is wanted, this is not wanted. Everything in Srimad Bhagavatam, every word is important. Sometimes we may not be using those things in our day-to-day life, that is okay. But the importance should be always there. It's not only the nice pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are only important. So I will give it more importance while there are other portions. For example, this war in Mahabharata, why should we talk about war? No, it is very disturbing to the mind. We don't have to know that. Or similarly, sometimes when we go through these kind of verses where it talks about creation, sometimes as devotees, we find it not very interesting. Okay, so let's, it's more important. How can we chant better? How can we, listen to the pastimes of the Lord and feel more happier and all that? Sometimes we have that, but it is important that we need to give equal importance to everything that has been said in Srimad Bhagavatam. So even sometimes if it is very technical, we may not be able to even explain, okay, can you really make that part? Yeah, we need to actually invest time to see whether this part really works, like how does it calculate and all that really works. I mean, it does work, but we need to understand, because so many things we have lost the information. So I was listening to Bhakti Charu Maharaj class on this And he was saying, yeah, someone asked this question, though, but there are so many questions about this part, but then the size of the part is not mentioned. How can you calculate? So many questions were coming. So there Maharaj was mentioning, actually, yeah, and someone asked this question, should we try out all these things? So he said, yes, if this is anything that is really, which we can substantiate and prove to the public, why not? Like that. There are so many Vedic concepts which are there. Everything needs research, right? It's like, it's not like we have lost that science. So we need to bring it, means we need to experiment, we need to put it, try that, whatever process is given here. And there are so many Vedic scriptures are there, Vedic books are there, we can take and do. So he says all of that is important. My point here is, therefore, we cannot ignore, okay, these things are not material right now, let's only simply chant. Yes, chanting is the ultimate thing, but whatever is given in Bhagavatam, when we read, we need to be fully conscious and with the same importance of every other verse, like that. That I will share that as well. Hare Krishna. I'll close here if there are no questions coming.
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभु जी, सभी को हरे कृष्णा।
Hare Krishna.
प्रणाम हम सबके तरफ से, हरे कृष्णा।
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम।
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much for the class.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thanks Prabhuji, thanks for the class.
Hare
Dandavat
Krishna.
pranam.
Dandavat pranam. Thank you. Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Gurudev ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Premanandi.